Okay, so week one finally here, and with me, someone who's been far too long since we've been able to record together, Stephen Hamner of QB Spotlight. Stephen, how are you doing today?
And doing great, brother. Excited to be on talking quarterbacks. How about yourself?
Man, I can't wait. And guys, as you can tell, as the scroll is going down at the bottom, we're talking Big 12 quarterbacks today. And this is something that we've both been texting about, super excited to see because there's so much new in the Big 12. We kind of wanted to go through today, give a quarterback breakdown for each team, talk lightly about each team, because I am as pumped for the Big 12 this year as any time I can remember in the past few seasons. But let's kick this off because we got 10 quarterbacks to get to, and this could take a bit. So, Oklahoma State and Spencer Sanders, right? Talk to me about him.
Yeah, I think anyone that's watched the Big 12, when they think Spencer Sanders, they think one really great play and then one really head scratching play the next play, right? So I think his biggest thing, and we were talking about this earlier, is just consistency, right? It's one thing to be uber talented, but it's another thing to be like uber consistent. Coaches will take the uber consistent guy 10 times out of 10 compared to the uber talented guy, right? So all intangibles, all the tools. He's the staple as far as quarterbacks in the Big 12. He's been here the longest. Been starting several years, so now it's like we are talking about. Can he put it all together? And it's if he can get rid of that like hero ball, where he has to make a play every play, and just throw the ball away or take a sack every once in a while. And I think he could take the next step and be a bit more consistent, man. But it all starts with that consistency. I know you kind of feel the same way, but that consistency that's what he's missing.
Yeah, I completely agree. As you said, we talked about this before we went live. I've highlighted plays before of Spencer Sanders where he does a pass and your jaw just drops, and you're like, man, that was a beautiful ball. And he might do it 4 or 5 times a game, but then there's always those plays, and it's just like, it's head scratching because you know what he's capable of. So this is a big year for Spencer Sanders. One thing I'm interested in hearing your opinion on. Look, Oklahoma State was a fantastic team last year. There's no taking that away from them. But Jim Knowles is the defensive coordinator there. He had that defense humming. He's no longer there. They've had some transfers going out. Now, I get it. Derek Mason was actually probably a really great hire for them in terms of defensive terminology. A lot of things are going to be really analogous. But at the end of the day, you don't have that top five defense to fall back on this year, or at least you got to show us that you can repeat it without Knowles. How much more pressure is on Spencer Sanders coming off of the year they had when they don't have that defensive coordinator there and they've lost guys to the transfer portal?
Yeah, I think there's a lot because anytime the offense or mainly Sanders would make a mistake, the defense bailed them out, right? I think the Big 12 championship game, I think he had 4 interceptions, and they still almost won it. They were an inch away from winning the Big 12 championship because of their defense, right? So I think that's a fair testament or fair question to ask, like, hey, like how much pressure is on Sanders because of this? I think there's a good amount. So I think best case scenario, the defense plays exactly like they did last year, even though it's probably not going to happen. But if they can even play like at a 75% or 80%, that's good enough in the Big 12 because of all the chaos that can potentially go on. But again, if Sanders takes care of the ball, even if the defense isn't as good as last year, that's the biggest thing. Just you don't want to give free turnovers. It sounds so simple, but it's the main thing for Spencer Sanders and the Oklahoma State team as a whole, I feel like.
Absolutely. Not to diverge too far off the topic at hand, but I love your point about turnovers, right? We just watched a game this weekend where the nation is talking about the onside kick Scott Frost called. While I agree, probably not the best call in that circumstance when you have momentum, there are two factors to me that explain the loss more than the onside kick. They lost the turnover battle and they lost the time of possession battle because they couldn't stop Northwestern running the ball. Both of those contributed to that loss far more than that one call, but kind of proving your point. Turnovers, you might only have two more turnovers than the other team. That's all it takes in this league to make that difference. Let's move forward. There's another quarterback in the state of Oklahoma that is getting a ton of attention, and I am really intrigued to see what they look like. Now, Stephen, Dylan Gabriel makes his way from UCF to Oklahoma, coming off of injury last year in a year where he was really starting to look like it was going to be another big year for Dylan Gabriel. The most intriguing thing about the Dylan Gabriel edition, in my opinion, is that he reunites with Jeff Lebby, someone he has prior experience with, and they put up big numbers at UCF. So when you're looking at Dillon Gabriel, Jeff Lebby, Oklahoma, and the Big 12, what are you thinking?
I feel like the fact, even though new OC, new quarterback, this familiarity there, right? And so a lot of the Big 12, like we talked, a lot of turnover, a lot of new quarterbacks. So yes, I know Gabriel's a new quarterback, but he's familiar with the system, familiar with the verbiage. When your quarterback has an experience, it can rub off and help the other players, right? He's able to be another coach on the field. So if you're an OU fan, I think you have the argument that you feel best about your quarterback position. And no surprise there, but the same as the past years. But even with all the turnover, you feel best about the quarterback position out of any team in the Big 12 because of Gabriel, because he's reuniting with his old AC, not AC, OC, excuse me.
Hey, it's Texas. We all need AC. It's on your mind. I get it.
Yeah. But he's familiar, he's experienced, and so I think that bodes well for Oklahoma and their offense, especially with all the turnover.
We're talking about a year where Brent Venables returns to Oklahoma. You have a defensive head coach, which, side point, look around the nation right now, man. Marcus Freeman, Dan Lanning, Brent Venables, all defensive-minded guys, all guys killing it in recruiting. Two of them have 5-star quarterbacks. I digress. You're in a situation where, yes, Brent Venables, defensive-minded head coach, but you're in a great position at the quarterback, even though you lose Lincoln Riley, an offensive-minded guy, because of the familiarity Dillon Gabriel, Jeff Lebby have. And Gabriel's not a guy that's super turnover prone, right? Like, that's not something we've seen from him. He does have that dual threat ability, which Lebby loves. And actually, if we're looking at it, last year, he was his most successful on the ground before the injury. I think when you look at the totality of circumstances, man, he's never played with a guy like Marvin Mims. He's never had a Theo Weiss, right? He's going to have the best weapons at his disposal. Granted, he'll have better athletes on the other side trying to stop him. I just love what OU gets to start off this year from a quarterback perspective because of that familiarity. And the last point I'll say about Oklahoma that I do kind of want to hear your point and takeaway of, not about the quarterback position, but it does affect the quarterback position. If we go back a year ago, they didn't have the depth at the running back position that they currently do now. Last year, only 2 scholarship running backs. We know what Oklahoma did last year, running the football. And what Oklahoma did under Lincoln Riley. That was their bread and butter. They weren't able to do it last year. They don't have that this year. And Jeff Lebby's not Lincoln Riley, but we do know Jeff Lebby uses running backs at a very high degree. How confident are you in not only the familiarity Jeff Lebby provides, but also the running attack and what that's going to do for Dillon Gabriel?
Yeah, man. I think even though it's a spread offense, they throw the ball around, it does rely on the run game. If you look at when he was at UCF or even Ole Miss, like whenever the pass game wasn't getting going, they would use running backs. Even Matt Corral ran a lot last year at Ole Miss, right? And so I think that's a good point. I think Lebby is an offensive, being the offensive-minded guy that he is, he's able to put his running backs in a good position to succeed, right? Usually you have like open space to run. You got some wide holes. So if the guys up front can provide what the running backs need, I think they can have that kind of running back by committee approach and, build depth and then build kind of experience that way.
Absolutely. Now, we got to go across the Red River now. Because Quinn Ewers, the prodigal son, returns to Texas. And this, if you're not keyed in on this as a college football fan, please do yourself the favor right now. Key in. Because you don't see quarterbacks come out of high school with a 1 rating often. And when you do, there's lofty expectations. Still a young guy. Really, he should be a freshman in college right now. This is technically his 2nd year, but, he didn't get a real shake at that Ohio State job. Steven, you know this as well as anybody. You don't come to a place like Ohio State in August and think you're going to end up being the 2nd-string quarterback when Ryan Day's more concerned about getting whoever's behind CJ Stroud up to speed as opposed to getting Quinn Ewers up to par with the 2nd-string guy. It just doesn't make sense. What are you excited about for Quinn Ewers? Because the talent we hear he has is really absurd, but that's going to be an interesting situation.
Yeah, I think just like every other person, you're just excited to see a 5-star quarterback play in an offense with Sark, calling the plays and putting him in a position to succeed, right? And Like last year, quarterback, at Texas wasn't necessarily the issue. I know they didn't play great at times, but they still put up some good numbers. It was more like situational. Great first half, and the second half you fall off. Right? There's a lot more than just the quarterback, and so I think the fact that Sark had some pretty good success at the quarterback position last year is a good sign. Then when you add a talented guy like Quinn Ewers, who is off the charts of guys or people who are way smarter than me and you at football are off the charts on this guy, right? And so
Yeah,
that
100%.
stock into that. And so I think we're just excited to see him sling the rocks on, and not week 1, but week 2 against Alabama. I think that's what everyone's kind of like ready to see.
Oh man, I can't wait. And you know what I love that you point out is last season we need to really look at Texas, right? Especially when we're really talking about quarterbacks. What is one thing we can say Texas did very well? They had a potent offense. They scored. And they did so with an offensive line that was inconsistent at best. That's about the nicest way to put it. You're gonna have some freshmen out there. I think that in a perfect world, you would rather have some sophomores, juniors, and seniors develop because they just have more familiarity as to what it takes to be successful. But nonetheless, a 5-star offensive tackle, if he's ready, he's ready. You're going into this year. Hopefully, you have an improved offensive line. The defense is something that must improve, but that's a conversation for a different day. Quinn Ewers inherits a situation where he's got one of the best weapons out wide in the Big 12 in Xavier Worthy, right? That dude set college football on fire as a true freshman. You got Bijan. You got Keelan Robinson. If Roshan Johnson comes back, you got Roshan. So you got plenty of talent out wide. You got plenty of talent in the backfield. And if you listen to people around that program, they love what they have at the tight end position. Jatavian Sanders is a guy you and I used to talk about at length when he was a prospect, and I'd be sitting there thinking, I don't know whether he's going to play edge or tight end. Ultimately, it's tight end. What do you think when you look at the weapons Quinn has at his disposal?
I mean, I think you could have an average quarterback at Texas and still put up pretty good numbers, right? And so
Exactly.
if you're Quinn, it's like, I mean, it's like you don't have to do everything. Just give the guys the rock. Hell, you could even turn around, just give the running backs the ball, and you're probably gonna be successful the majority of the time. You know what I mean? So it's like remembering, hey, I got a big arm, I'm talented, I'm can all do all these crazy throws, but at the end of the day, if I just give the ball to these playmakers around me, we're probably gonna be okay, right? So it's cliche and obvious, but if you don't do too much and you let your other guys do the majority of the workload, you'll look even better.
Absolutely. And especially if you're a quarterback that's still learning, right? Because there was some talk going down the stretch, Hudson Card, Quinn Ewers, and there was a lot of big to do made about who would be the starting quarterback. I thought it was likely that it was going to be Quinn Ewers, but I want to get your take on this because I could be completely off base in my thinking here. And if I am, please tell me because it'd be a great learning moment. In a situation where you have a quarterback competition and you have a young guy it's his first year in the system, and then you have a guy who it's his second year in the system, you're high on what they can both do, but they're neck and neck. I'm of the mindset that in that situation, I'm going to go with the younger guy because if he's right neck and neck with the dude that's been in the system for a year longer, chances are in a year he'll be further ahead. And I think that's exactly what we just saw with Quinn Ewers. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you probably nailed it. I think that's probably kind of what ultimately was the case, and from what we hear, he's just such a generational talent that they're probably willing to maybe take a few licks and bruises just because he was so good. But I do think it speaks volumes to Hudson Card too, because I mean, Quinn Ewers is a dude coming in, and he stayed there, he competed. Like that says a lot about Card too. So I think Card's pretty dang good as well. And so I think they got a pretty stout room now. But I think you're right. I think that's probably why they went with Quinn. But at the same time, the fact that it lasted this long says a lot about Card and his development as well.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think Quinn Ewers can be successful at Texas because they have the talent outside on the wide receiver, right? We just talked about Worthy, but they got a lot of dudes they're really excited about in that wide receiver room, right? They got a lot of running backs, they got tight ends. It's the offensive line that I think is going to be huge for Quinn Ewers. But if that offensive line can keep him upright, I think you put it best. You don't have to do a whole lot. Continue to learn, take it week by week and put your guys in position for them to go make a play because you got a lot of dudes out there. Keeping in the state of Texas, man, we got several quarterbacks in the state of Texas we got to talk about. Let's go to Texas Tech, right? I want to get your opinion on the quarterback situation there because this is one that I think is going to fly under the radar until people realize that this is one they should have been keyed in on.
Yeah, so I think, like you're talking about Tyler Shuck from Texas Tech, the transfer from Oregon last year, who won the starting job, got hurt, and he was like last year he was a pretty big time transfer guy, like or pretty big time deal. And he transferred. Not much was made out of him winning the starting job this year. I don't think. Like I didn't see a lot of publicity or media stuff, or people even really caring. So I think you're right. It's like an underrated situation that he's in, because if he comes out and he has a good year, then Texas Tech all of a sudden is going bowling and could be 7+8 wins. But he's a talented guy at Oregon. He's an athletic guy, so I still think there's probably a lot of unknown about him. But if you're a Texas Tech fan, I think you should be. I still think you should be pretty excited about Shuck winning the starting job and being kind of flying under the radar a bit.
Yeah, I want to take a step back real quick because there's something we've both alluded to. You've outright said it several times, but I think it bodes well for Texas Tech, and especially if you're a Texas Tech fan listening right now. One of the themes we keep talking about in the Big 12 is chaos, right? And it's not just at the quarterback position. You look top to bottom in the Big 12 right now, it's chaos.
Yeah.
How good is that for a Texas Tech, right? Where you look around and there's so many moving pieces within the Big 12. You're kind of flying under the radar right now with a real opportunity to, I'm not saying make a college football playoff, but to just kind of put some people on notice thinking maybe we should have paid a little bit more attention to there. How good is that for Texas Tech that there's all this chaos in the league?
I think that's a great point you made. I haven't even thought about that, because if you think about Texas Tech, you think of a team that has upset Texas, has upset Oklahoma over the years.
They've done it.
They're a chaotic team. They cause chaos, right? Like, and so I think the fact that the Big 12 is a chaotic league right now only bodes well in their favor, especially because they're flying under the radar probably even more, right? So
yeah,
really good point. And I think hell, they could end up going 4-8, not playing very well, right? But at the same time, I think those games are going to be exciting and fun.
But look, I think there is something to be said, though. When you look at a team and you're like, I could see you surprising a lot of people, or I can see you just getting drudged through the league. I really don't know. There's a lot of fun in that. I don't mind being wrong. I'm wrong probably. I mean, if you ask my fiance, I'm wrong more often than I'm right. But if you ask me, hey, I'm infallible, right? So
Right.
there's a balance, though. Keeping in the state of Texas, there's a quarterback situation, a quarterback battle that occurred this offseason that turned some heads because it didn't happen how quarterback battles are supposed to happen. And of course, I'm talking about Baylor. Stephen, how surprised were you when long ago Dave Aranda came out and said, hey, our former starter, he's not going to be the guy. The other guy won the job, because conventional wisdom dictates you wait as long as you can to do that. Unfortunately, the reason is, and it is a little messed up, you want to ensure that you have a good quarterback that if anything happens to your starter, you have someone you have faith in. Aranda did it so that his other quarterback could get an opportunity elsewhere. What was your thoughts during all of that?
Yeah, I definitely was surprised, and I definitely agree. Did it so your guy could have another chance. But I also think, I don't think he would have done that if he didn't feel so confident about Blake Shapen either, right? And so I think that tells you that, hey, he probably feels pretty good. So yeah, it's great. It's a good story. Yeah, you lost the starting job, you can go transfer, but at the same time, like, he's probably thinking like, no, we feel pretty good here. Like if it was a neck and neck battle, they probably wouldn't have said anything, right? They probably would have
100%.
kept, even if Shapen was leading, right? But yeah, so I think it bodes well, and I think it speaks a lot to Shapen how much confidence they had. And
Yeah, look, I'm super intrigued, very keyed in on Baylor right now because look, we'd be flat out lying if we're saying anything other than Dave Aranda is one of the premier coaches
yes,
in college football. What he has done at Baylor needs your attention. And he did something this offseason that, quite frankly, I respected, because all too many times there might be a quarterback battle that, let's be honest, man, you and I will talk behind the camera and we know the quarterback battle's probably not there, right? It's probably been decided, but that quarterback battle is going to go until game one, just because you don't want a guy to transfer. In that era and in the transfer portal era, Dave Aranda came out and said, no, I mean, I know who my guy is and I'm not going to drag this out. And he let Bohannon know so that Bohannon could have an opportunity elsewhere. I got a lot of respect for that move. I just don't think there's any other way you can look at it. but I can't wait to see Baylor this year. So, kind of taking a step back, let's talk about Baylor as a whole. You win the Big 12 last year, but you lose some very talented pieces. You still have Dave Aranda. You still have some talent. What is your expectations for Baylor this season?
I think if you're a Baylor, I think you should have the exact same expectations you had last year. Go
Yeah,
into
why not?
you know what I mean? Like people in the media, like I think their win total is like 7.5. So people in the media obviously think, or the odds makers obviously think that it was kind of like a one-off year. Like, oh yeah, they made a good run, but they're going to be back in that 7-ish range. But if I'm Baylor, I'm thinking, hey, like our starting quarterback just beat out the quarterback last year that led us to the Big 12 championship. We feel pretty good. I don't care that we lost X, Y, and Z. We feel like we got the best coach in the Big 12. Like he does things his own way. He doesn't, doesn't change who he is for how other coaches are. He just sticks to what he does, and so I feel pretty good if I'm Baylor. I say let's go get another shot. The Big 12 is chaotic. Well, Coach Aranda is not chaotic. He's organized to the book, so it's like he doesn't care if chaos is going around. He's who he is, and I think that kind of rubs off on his players. And so, like you said, I think you're right. I think they have a chance to make another run at the Big 12 championship.
I love that point you just made that amidst all the chaos, you actually have a leader in a situation where they can kind of sail steady
Yep.
through the night, right? One of the big reasons why I'm also very high on Oklahoma, it's because one thing we've seen from Brent Venables, he's been a calming force in Norman. So much so that amongst all this chaos, not to say that there's not new and not change at Norman, but amongst all this chaos, they're largely sailing smooth through the night because of the leadership they have. I think that's a fantastic point. Something that people might lose when thinking of win losses is who your leadership is, what they do, and the state of the league. I really, really love that point. Crazily enough, we're staying in the state of Texas, right? TCU.
Mm.
What's your thoughts there, right? Max Duggan, Chandler Jones. What are you thinking in this situation? And especially with a new head coach, we don't have the legendary ball coach Gary Patterson with TCU anymore.
So I think they're actually in a good position, right? You got Chandler Morris and Max Duggan. And so from what I'm hearing, and I don't know if this is worth anything, that they're leaning towards Morris, and I'm not breaking any news. I think if you read the tea leaves or listen to people that know what's going on, they've been kind of saying that. But at the same time, I feel like whoever wins the starting job, you got a pretty good backup, right? You got some good depth at position. You know what Max Duggan can do. Morris came on the scene last year and had one really big game and did some other good things as well. So I think the fact they're in that system with Sonny Dykes, this kind of quarterback friendly system, I think whoever ends up being the guy ultimately, they're going to be in a chance to kind of optimize their ability as a quarterback. So it's kind of a underrated quarterback battle. I feel like it's TCU, but at the same time, it's going to be one worth keeping up with for the beginning of the season and throughout the season.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think I'm so keyed in on right now is with TCU, you're having a situation where you're not only having a new head coach, you lost one of the most talented players, in my opinion, on your roster in Zach Evans, right? He's now with Ole Miss. He was a running back that you could increase his carries this year and he could take you somewhere. I'm wondering what happens there, but TCU as a whole is just going to be super intriguing to me, a team we have got to keep an eye on. Now, I don't mean to cut TCU short, but there's another transfer that has occurred in the Big 12 that I'm really interested in, and that's JT Daniels at West Virginia. When you're looking at JT Daniels with West Virginia, what are you thinking there?
Yeah, stay on the field, right? Like if you can just stay on the field, then you can really see what you have. Because like the 4 games he had with Georgia 2 years ago, everyone was like, "Wow, this is the guy, the big 5-star recruit we knew he was in high school." This and that. So I think there's still some unknown, but if he can just stay on the field, and hopefully, he gets in a position to succeed, and West Virginia can hopefully open up that offense a bit more. That's been so like vanilla, if you will, right? Or so just kind of like dunk and dink, dunk and dink.
Yeah, and this is a great opportunity for JT Daniels as well. A quarterback that came out of high school is highly lauded as any quarterback in recent memory, coming from a very quarterback friendly system at the high school level in modern day out there in California. First year at USC looks really, really, really good. Gets hurt very early on game 2. Goes to Georgia. Many people, including myself, assumed once he gets healthy, he's going to be the guy. And unfortunately, that never came to be. Now he's in a situation at West Virginia where it's almost do or die for a quarterback that has all the ability you could want. and a really great opportunity to put it all together. Do you think that he could be a huge addition for West Virginia this year?
I do. Like if he plays up to his potential, then I do. I mean, their biggest thing was like they weren't able to push the ball downfield the past few seasons, right? And maybe that's some of the offensive scheme, maybe it's some of the old quarterback. But if you have a guy like Daniels who was made to push the ball downfield, then hopefully that comes to fruition in the actual offense. So if he plays up to his potential, he could be a really really big addition, and West Virginia could potentially surprise people in the chaotic Big 12.
Absolutely. And one thing you get with JT Daniels, the same thing you get with Dylan Gabriel. Gabriel has exponentially more experience because of the games he's been able to play in, but JT Daniels does offer you some experience, right? Like, it's not like you're getting in a transfer that only has upside. You get the best of both worlds, right? I always talk about this with the transfer portal. You win if you can get in a guy you have faith in. You really win the transfer portal if that guy has legitimate college football experience, because those guys don't grow on trees, right? That's a huge thing for West Virginia, something I love. We've talked about some transfer quarterbacks, and one transfer quarterback we haven't hit yet, Adrian Martinez, Kansas State. What are you thinking here? Because he was a guy who, like we talked about with Spencer Sanders, he'll have a play and you're thinking, man, we're in for it if he's playing like that all game. The question is consistency. What are you thinking with Adrian Martinez?
Man, I think you nailed it. Very Spencer Sanders type vibes, right? But at the same time, maybe a change of scenery is good for him. New coaching staff that's really preaching discipline, discipline, discipline. It's a new offensive system where it's not going to be as much like hero ball, if you will, as maybe at Nebraska. So hopefully the change of scenery, the new offensive system will put him in a better position to be consistent. It's probably the most positive spin you can have on it, but he's a talented guy. So now it's like you said, can you take that next step and be consistent?
Now, final two teams on the list, and I saved one of these two teams for good reason, man, because they are a little bit of an enigma within the Big 12 to me. Iowa State. Iowa State loses such an astronomical percentage of their offense from a year ago. What are you thinking about Hunter Deckers and Iowa State in 2022?
Dude, I think you nailed this when we talked earlier. So I'm gonna let you take this here in a second. But Hunter Deckers is a lot of unknown, and that kind of describes their whole team, right? And you kind of nailed it. You kind of talked about that earlier, so I'll let you kind of run with it. But I don't know.
Yeah. So when I look at Iowa State, I have to ask myself, what do we know, right? And when I ask myself, what do we know? I have faith that they're going to be a well-coached team. I don't think that's going to change this year. Campbell has proved he's going to have them disciplined. They're going to be a well-coached team. So I certainly expect that. I'm interested in the defense this year. Luckily, they were able to retain some pieces of the defense this year, but this is a quarterback video. So when I look at the quarterback, that's a huge unknown for me. And though I'm about to talk about a piece that isn't a quarterback, an established running back can be a young quarterback's best friend, especially if that established running back is Breece Hall, who unfortunately is no longer there either. When I look at Iowa State, I think much like Texas Tech, the chaos within the Big 12 is really your saving grace right now. Where can you kind of make your place within this chaotic league? But at the end of the day, you're replacing such a high percentage of your offense. I'm just really interested to see how it's going to come together, because the past two seasons, we've expected Iowa State to be right there at the end of the Big 12 season, competing for that Big 12 championship. Whether they make it to the game or not is irrelevant. They've been one of the teams in contention. I don't know that you can expect that this year when such a high percentage of that offense is no longer there. Do you think that's fair or unfair?
No, I think that's fair, and I think that's a good point. And I would also say, because you talked about Matt Campbell, right? And he's almost like a very similar, somewhat similar to Dave Aranda. He's like a steady, consistent ship in the storm, right? So I think a point to be made would be, whenever there's a lot of hype on Iowa State and Matt Campbell, they've been expected to do really well, but maybe haven't quite hit that hype.
Very true. Last year.
Yeah, exactly. And whenever they're kind of like underrated and forgotten about, that seems like that's when they attack and they get 8+ wins. That's when they beat OU. You know what I mean? So if you want to spin it from that point of view, then maybe the fact they have Matt Campbell, even though they've lost so many people, you can just trust in Campbell's coaching ability, to surprise some people and to help develop the quarterback, right? So again, a lot of unknowns, but the fact Campbell's there, if you're an Iowa State fan, you can rest in that.
The last name on our list is Jalen Daniels with Kansas. Now, talk to me about Kansas this year, because that's a team that they're just looking to go up. They're looking to build on anything they can. So what are you hearing there?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Just go up. Just even if the wins aren't great, just be competitive in the games. You don't have to have all the games like Texas last year and just upset people. Just be competitive. And I think if you're competitive, that's something to build on, because they usually aren't all the time. So just be competitive. And if you can have like every game close, like the Texas OU games, then I think you'd be in a good position.
It has been so much fun talking to you about the quarterback position today. We're going to have to get together real soon and do this for every single league. But before I let you out of here, let the people know where they can find you.
Yeah, just our YouTube channel, QB Spotlight, or on Twitter, QB Spotlight. That's kind of where we spend most of our time. We try to put out several videos, excuse me, a week of just breaking down what the quarterback needs to do. Excuse me, I can't talk, against certain defenses. So especially with the season coming up, we'll have an emphasis on a defensive breakdown and what the guys need to do from the quarterback position.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I go for any quarterback questions I have, or I just simply text you. So guys, if you haven't already, I highly recommend go over to Quarterback Spotlight's channel. A ton of great information over there. You're going to learn a lot. I promise you that. It's been a ton of fun talking to you today, man. Can't wait to do it again. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next time. That's it. See ya.